At 29, Daniel looked successful from the outside. The black BMW X5 parked in front of his townhouse still smelled new 6 months after signing the lease. Inside the garage sat a $3,200 Peloton with a thin layer of dust on the screen, 2 paddleboards hanging untouched against the wall, and stacks of unopened Amazon boxes he barely remembered ordering. His kitchen had matte black appliances, expensive espresso pods, and almost no actual food. Every month, nearly all of his income disappeared before payday even arrived. The car payment, the subscriptions, the upgraded apartment, the weekends out that somehow became mandatory. Nothing looked reckless individually. Together, they formed a lifestyle that required constant maintenance. Across town, Marcus made almost the same salary. His apartment was half the size, 1,100 square feet, older building, weak water pressure, faded carpet near the hallway entrance. He drove an 8-year-old Toyota Camry with 146,000 miles on it, and a dent near the rear bumper he never bothered fixing. But every Friday morning, before he touched $1 of his paycheck, $500 disappeared automatically into index funds. Daniel bought visible upgrades. Marcus bought invisible infrastructure. One looked wealthier at dinner parties. The other slept better on Sunday nights. And over the next 30 years, that difference would become almost impossible to reverse. Most people think financial destruction arrives dramatically. A gambling addiction, a failed business, credit card debt stacked so high it becomes impossible to ignore. But in America, financial fragility usually arrives quietly. It arrives as recurring convenience. A $918 luxury SUV lease, a $240 cable and streaming stack, a 1,600 square foot apartment with an unused guest bedroom and a balcony nobody sits on after the first month. Small upgrades repeated long enough become permanent overhead. That is the part people miss. The danger is rarely the purchase itself. The danger is the subscription attached to your identity afterward. Because recurring expenses behave differently than one-time spending. They become fixed obligations your future self must continue funding regardless of stress, layoffs, burnout, recessions, or exhaustion. Every monthly payment becomes another employee, taking income from your labor before you ever see it. And the nervous system feels this long before the bank account does. People call it being stressed. But most of the time, it is something more specific. It is the psychological weight of maintaining a lifestyle that cannot tolerate interruption. This is why 2 people earning the same income can experience completely different levels of anxiety. One person owns their schedule. The other owns expensive proof that they are doing well. The outside appearance can look nearly identical. The internal reality does not, because visible wealth and financial stability are not the same system. Daniel loved the feeling of the black BMW X5 at night, the ambient lighting across the dashboard, the oversized rims, the silent interior during highway drives. For a while, the lease payment felt justified because the vehicle made him feel like he was moving forward in life. The payment was $918 a month, not catastrophic, just normalized. That is how most expensive financial decisions enter a person's life, quietly, wrapped in monthly terms instead of total cost. But if you invested that same $918 every month into a basic index fund earning the historical market average for 30 years, the result would be more than $1.1 million. Not because the SUV cost $1 million, because recurring spending destroys compounding in the same way recurring investing builds it. That is the real psychological battle. Every recurring expense competes against a future version of your freedom. And freedom rarely feels urgent in your 20s. Leather seats feel urgent. Social status feels urgent. Looking successful at valet parking feels urgent. Future optionality does not. This is why lifestyle creep is so dangerous. It does not feel destructive while it is happening. It feels earned, reasonable, temporary. Until the monthly obligations become so large that your career stops being a choice and starts becoming a survival mechanism. At that point, the expensive car is no longer transportation. It is infrastructure for financial dependence. Marcus noticed something strange around year 3. His life did not look dramatically different from the outside. He still lived in the same apartment. still drove the same aging Toyota Camry with weak air conditioning and a coffee stain near the center console, still bought generic groceries, still skipped most impulse purchases. But his body felt different. The constant low-grade panic had started fading, not completely, just enough to notice. Most people think financial stress comes from not making enough money. Sometimes that is true. But often the stress comes from building a life with no margin for error. A life where every paycheck already has assignments before it arrives. The nervous system keeps score of this even when people pretend everything is fine. A person with a luxury car payment, rising credit card balances, multiple subscription bills, and a lifestyle that requires nearly every dollar they earn will eventually start reacting to normal inconveniences like emergencies. A delayed paycheck feels threatening. A rumor about layoffs feels personal. Even small, unexpected expenses create disproportionate anxiety because the entire financial structure is stretched too tightly. Marcus had quietly built something different. His monthly investing habit created financial breathing room before it created visible wealth. And breathing room changes behavior. It lowers desperation. It reduces emotional decision-making. It allows patience to exist. That is the hidden benefit of investing early. The account grows slowly, but the nervous system stabilizes first. The first few years felt almost disappointing. Marcus would open his brokerage account during lunch breaks and stare at numbers that barely seemed to move. After nearly a year of automatic investing, the balance still looked small compared to the effort required to build it. Meanwhile, people around him continued upgrading their lives in visible ways. New apartments, new cars, trips to Miami, expensive watches photographed beside cocktails under dim restaurant lighting. His progress felt invisible by comparison. That is the phase where most people quit. Not because they are lazy. Because the human brain struggles to stay committed to rewards that arrive slowly and quietly. The nervous system wants immediate evidence that sacrifice is working. Investing rarely provides that early on. But somewhere around the $100,000 mark, the experience changes. The account stops feeling like storage and starts feeling mechanical. The market fluctuations become larger. A strong year in the market suddenly produces returns larger than the amount he personally contributed. The money already inside the system begins working harder than the new money entering it. That psychological shift matters more than most people realize. Because the moment your investments generate more than your annual contributions, your relationship with work changes. Your future stops depending entirely on your labor. Time itself starts participating. That is the crossover point people misunderstand. It is not just a financial milestone. It is the moment compounding becomes visible enough for the human brain to finally believe it is real. Daniel never made one catastrophic financial decision. That is what made the situation dangerous. His life expanded through small upgrades that felt harmless at the time. First came the luxury apartment because he was finally doing well. Then the larger television, mounted above a modern electric fireplace that was used twice during winter. Then the premium gym membership with towel service and eucalyptus steam rooms he barely visited after February. Then the weekend trips that stopped feeling optional because everyone in his social circle traveled constantly. Nothing individually looked irrational, but every upgrade quietly increased the amount of money required to maintain his normal life. That is how lifestyle creep operates in America. It does not arrive as recklessness. It arrives disguised as adulthood. Better furniture, better neighborhoods, better experiences, better convenience. Every improvement appears reasonable when viewed alone. Together, they create a financial structure that becomes emotionally expensive to sustain. Because once a person adapts to a higher standard of living, losing it feels like failure even when the lifestyle was creating anxiety in the first place. That is the psychological trap. People become loyal to lifestyles that are exhausting them. Marcus avoided this by doing something visually unimpressive. He kept his fixed expenses low even as his income increased. Raises improved his margin instead of his image. The extra money flowed into index funds automatically before lifestyle inflation could absorb it. Over time, this created something Daniel never fully developed: financial resilience. And resilience compounds just like money does. One Friday night, Daniel spent $240 on dinner without thinking much about it. A rooftop steakhouse downtown, dim lighting, Wagyu sliders, truffle fries, cocktails served in smoked glass cups. The entire evening lasted maybe 3 hours before everyone went home and posted filtered photos of the city skyline to Instagram stories that disappeared the next morning. By Monday, the emotional effect was already fading. That is the uncomfortable reality most spending tries to avoid. A surprising amount of consumption delivers very short-lived emotional returns. A $280 pair of limited edition sneakers feels exciting for about 2 weeks before becoming another object near the closet door. A 1,600 square foot apartment feels luxurious until the unused guest bedroom turns into storage space for unopened packages and laundry baskets. Even expensive purchases normalize faster than people expect because the human brain adapts aggressively to improved conditions. But investments behave differently. An invested dollar continues working long after the emotional excitement of spending would have disappeared. The money compounds quietly while the memory of the purchase dissolves almost immediately. That changes the math entirely. The real comparison is not spend versus save. It is temporary stimulation versus permanent infrastructure. Marcus understood this slowly over time. Every automated transfer represented future flexibility. More breathing room, more negotiating power with employers, more ability to survive uncertainty without panic. Daniel kept buying experiences that made him feel successful for weekends. Marcus kept building systems that made his future less fragile for decades. Marcus eventually realized something uncomfortable about personal finance. Most financial failure is not caused by lack of intelligence. It is caused by interruption. People start investing, then the car needs repairs. A friend plans a bachelor party in Scottsdale. Airline prices spike before the holidays. The market drops 12% in 2 months, and headlines begin using words like panic and collapse. Suddenly, the automatic transfer feels negotiable. That is why automation matters so much. Automation removes the monthly argument between your present emotions and your future interests. Every Friday morning, Marcus's $500 investment transfer executed before he saw the money in checking. The system ran quietly in the background like a utility bill. No motivation required, no decision-making energy required, no debate. That structure protected him from himself. Because human beings are extremely skilled at rationalizing short-term consumption, especially after stressful weeks, especially after disappointments, especially when everyone around them appears to be spending freely. Willpower eventually weakens, systems do not. Over time, Marcus stopped experiencing investing as sacrifice. The transfer became part of the architecture of his life. His spending adjusted around what remained, instead of consuming everything first and hoping something would be left over later. That single behavioral shift changed the trajectory of his entire financial future. The market returns mattered, but the real breakthrough happened earlier. The real breakthrough was turning investing from a choice into a default. During year 7, the market dropped hard. News anchors spoke with the same rehearsed urgency they always used during downturns. Red numbers flooded financial apps. Social media filled with predictions about recessions, unemployment, and economic collapse. Daniel checked his retirement account constantly during those months, even though he barely invested consistently in the first place. Marcus checked less often, not because he felt fearless, because he had already lived through enough volatility to understand something most people never fully internalize. Market drops feel permanent while they are happening. They almost never are. That lesson cannot be learned intellectually alone. It has to be experienced emotionally with real money involved. The first major downturn always feels personal. The second feels survivable. By the third or fourth cycle, panic begins losing its authority. That is one of the hidden benefits of long-term investing. It trains emotional stability. Marcus kept buying index funds automatically while prices were falling. Same amount, same schedule, same behavior. Months later, the market recovered like it, historically, always had across long enough periods of time. Those investments purchased during fear, eventually became some of the most profitable shares in his portfolio. Meanwhile, Daniel experienced every downturn as psychological stress because his financial structure depended heavily on continued income and uninterrupted economic stability. Patience changed Marcus's finances, but it also changed his relationship with uncertainty. And that second transformation mattered even more over the long run. By his mid-50s, Marcus's life no longer looked dramatic. That was the point. The brokerage account had grown steadily for decades through the same repetitive behavior most people consider boring. The automatic transfers, the low-cost index funds, the refusal to constantly upgrade his lifestyle every time his income increased. Nothing about the strategy sounded impressive at dinner parties, because consistency rarely does. But the effects had become impossible to ignore. His investments now generated more in an average year than many Americans earned through full-time work. Not every year, markets still fluctuated. Some years were ugly, but the structure underneath his life had changed permanently. Work was no longer pure survival. That distinction changes the texture of daily life in ways difficult to explain to someone still financially fragile. A toxic boss becomes easier to walk away from. Economic downturns become less psychologically consuming. Unexpected expenses stop feeling like personal disasters. Even ordinary conversations about money begin losing their emotional charge, because the nervous system no longer experiences every financial variable as a threat. Daniel still looked wealthier to certain people. Better car, larger home, more visible consumption. But Marcus possessed something far more valuable: margin, and margin creates optionality. That is the real definition of wealth, not owning the most impressive objects, not appearing successful online, not constructing a lifestyle that requires constant income to survive. Real wealth is the ability to remain calm when life becomes expensive, because the highest form of financial freedom is needing less in order to feel secure.